Hey guys, welcome back. Um, Today we're going to go ahead and knock out another two sections on that chapter 19, very, very, very early evolution. And last time we talked about the Big Bang, some ideas about how the Earth may have initially formed. And today we're going to talk about the super tricky thing, which is getting this cold, lifeless rock, or hot, lifeless rock, we're not really sure, to have life on it. And in biology, we define the basic unit of life as the cell. And so we have to make a cell, or something before a cell, or some component of a cell from non-living organic or inorganic components. And this is really quite a chore, considering humans live such short lives. We have to make some assumptions about what we think was in the past, and kind of go from there. But it has led to some really cool experiments, and I hope you enjoy them. So, in 1925, chemists were able to synthesize the first organic molecules in the lab, which kind of did away with this old idea that living things had some sort of special or unique substance of life in them that we didn't see in things like rocks and that kind of stuff. And so once we were able to make urea was the first synthesized organic molecule, we were able to show that we could take non-living stuff and make it into organic molecules, components of living stuff. And so that was a big step in kind of a cool direction for chemistry. Uh, so we have three main hypotheses for how we got our first organic monomers here on Earth. An organic monomer, we're talking like um, amino acid or nucleotide or fatty acid, anything that builds up bigger molecules that you and I depend on. And we're not really sure which is right because, I mean, we weren't there for this, but here you have it. The first idea is lightning fueled atmospheric reactions. So reactions of the gases that were in our atmosphere that are powered by lightning as the catalyst. The second idea is reactions occurring at hydrothermal vents in the bottom of the oceans, or perhaps the oceans, who knows, they might have been shallow. I mean, if you're waiting for all of your water to come from meteorites, your ocean might be, half an inch deep or something like that. So maybe it was shallow at that time. And finally, delivery from space, where organic molecules literally came in on meteorites and life. So here we go. Number one, lightning-fueled atmospheric reactions. Super cool experiment, 1953 by Miller and Urey. And these guys, I'll show you the test apparatus here. But basically what they did was they made some educated guesses, hypothesized about what organic molecules might have been in our gases in the early Earth's existence, like methane and carbon dioxide and that kind of stuff. And so they put these gases together, shocked them with electricity to show that's their lab simulated lightning basically, and give it some time. And I got a video that I think will be a little bit helpful, and I do want to show you that right now. So we're going to jump to YouTube real quick.
In the 1920s, Oparin and Haldane hypothesized that the atmosphere of the primitive Earth contained gases such as nitrogen, ammonia, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and hydrogen. Oxygen did not become a part of the atmosphere until the advent of photosynthesis millions of years later. It was further hypothesized that under these conditions, organic molecules could be formed if there were a source of energy such as electricity from storms or ultraviolet radiation from the sun. In 1953, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey tested this hypothesis. They constructed a closed system with a reservoir for water, sampling ports, a chamber for the input of electrical energy, and a condenser to convert the water vapor back to a liquid. The researchers then added water, hydrogen gas, methane, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and nitrogen. The water was heated to form a vapor, and electrical sparks were generated to mimic lightning. This apparatus simulated the possible conditions of the early Earth. When the water was analyzed after 1 week, they found simple carbon compounds such as formaldehyde and hydrogen cyanide. These compounds then combine to produce formic acid, urea, and amino acids. In similar experiments carried out over the next several years, various organic compounds have been synthesized. These experiments showed that simple organic compounds, including the building blocks of proteins and other macromolecules, could be formed from gases present in the primitive atmosphere with the input of electrical energy. In the 19
Cool. So, sorry to start that video over again by accident there, but there you have it. Kind of a cool idea. Um, Problems with it, it requires a lot of a few assumptions, of course. You know, they had to put these gases in here, then they had to strike them with lightning, or at least the tiny lab-based lightning. But the cool thing about it was they were able to make some simple amino acids, which is great. I mean that's a pretty cool trick. So they were able to do this, and if the conditions on the early Earth were like the conditions that they made in their lab, then this could be a very feasible hypothesis for a naturalist, you know, or anyone really to kind of think, well, maybe that's a way we could make an amino acid or early on in the world. So your organic monomers are going to form. Somehow, they're here. The second idea, first was the lightning in the environment. The second is going to be reactions at hydrothermal vents. And so we still have these vents in the bottom of the ocean that are spewing, you know, steam and hot gases like sulfur from like basically underwater volcanoes is all they are. And these occur on the ocean floor. So we assume, hey, maybe they were occurring back in the day too, you know, billions of years ago. And so you'd have water that may have very well been mineral rich because it came in on meteorites and it was heated by these geothermal energy streams, which is the geothermal heat that rises up out of the earth is what's kind of acting as our catalyst to get these reactions going. And so perhaps something like this. And in this mix where the ocean is not quite very freezing cold and the steam is not quite boiling, you might get your very first forms of, you know, amino acids and fatty acids and the potential for some sort of life to evolve right in here. And so that's the second idea. So the third idea is probably my favorite, and I try not to sound like a jerk when I say that, but delivery from space. Just there you go. I mean, meteorites that fall to Earth, some of these guys can carry little tiny organic monomers that had formed from space. And modern day meteorites that fall to Earth, sometimes if we really do some searching, we can find little amino acids in there, some simple sugars, and some nucleotide bases, just because the right carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen and oxygen bonded together, we get a nucleotide in there somewheres. And so similar compounds have been discovered in gas clouds surrounding nearby stars. So maybe you and I and and everything came from space. I mean, there you go. Chew that idea over for a while. All right, so there's that. A long way to say we don't know. 19.4, next section is polymers to protocells. So having an amino acid is one thing. Having a cell is quite another. If you guys have taken biology with me, you've seen how cells have proteins that regulate other proteins and respond to signals, and they're incredibly, impossibly complex. And so to get, you know, our little amino acid to a cell, we must first get to something that's not quite a cell, but is almost a cell, because, you know, that's the way evolution works. So all our cells today that we know of contain some sort of plasma membrane, and that's usually almost certainly made of a lipid bilayer. A phospholipid bilayer makes up this functioning membrane of cells now. And our cells now have a genome of DNA, and that DNA is transcribed into RNA, and then ribosomes can translate that RNA into proteins, and thanks to chapters like 9 and 10 in your book, you've all heard about enough of that to last you a lifetime. And so our hypothesis, we got to figure out how these earliest cells might have formed. The idea is that it probably occurred in a stepwise process, beginning with inorganic materials because that's what we find most abundantly in our very primitive Earth meteorite thing that we're working with here. And so let's check out this. We're trying to take a step from something very, very simple to something very, very complex. But we have billions of years to work with, so we'll probably be okay. Inorganic molecules. This one looks like perhaps it's a methane. They're self-assembling, maybe being struck by lightning, maybe coming in the form of meteorites, who knows? But they get here, and when he gets here, he's heated up by a little lightning or a sulfur event in the bottom of the ocean, bonds to another carbon or nitrogen, and next thing you know, you've got your really simple organic monomer, and these guys are in a good environment to bond with somebody else, and pretty soon you get this organic polymer. And so we went from one little tiny amino acid. Well, now we've got ourselves a little primitive RNA strand, which is cool. I mean, there you go. So maybe that RNA strand can interact with some other molecules in some form of early metabolism. And when he does that, maybe it gives him just a little tiny bit of a selective advantage over other RNA molecules, and maybe he can self-assemble in a little vesicle, make a little bubble around himself, and now he's better than all those other RNA molecules in the pond, and they can just die, and he can just go on doing his RNA thing in the bubble. And if that keeps going, maybe he can become a genome, like your standard viral genome that can sometimes be RNA in a little protein capsule. He could be like a little baby virus chilling in the pond. He wouldn't have anyone to infect, but he could be there, and that would be cool. And so if he had, some form of information and some form of boundary, maybe we could call that a protocell. What comes before the cell, the protocell. And since DNA hasn't evolved yet, and RNA is single-stranded and so much more simple than DNA, maybe we can say that it's like it lives in an RNA world. And some RNAs, even, that are around today, can actually work as enzymes in certain circumstances. And so maybe, RNA could be the information, the enzyme, and we could have a really simple system of life in probably some sort of little aquatic environment. And so they're subject to selective pressures. Some cells live, so, protocells rather, some protocells live, some protocells die. And maybe one of these guys, instead of one chain, he becomes two strains. And next thing you know, he's replacing all his uracils with thymine, and boom, DNA. And then the DNA cells are way better than those RNA protocells, so goodbye to you, hello to you. And we get a brand new world of DNA-based cells. And from there, the sky's the limit, because we can do anything now, like grow and reproduce and stuff. So that's the idea. How did it happen? I don't know. But here's some ideas. One idea is a tidal flat hypothesis, where the sea kind of recedes and there's a big tidal flat. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So non-biological processes might have concentrated some of those organic subunits. So, how did our first little amino acids actually get together? Well, maybe it happened over clay, clay-rich tidal flats, when that ocean, kind of recedes a little bit with its teeny tiny tide that it has from, being a little ocean that came from meteorites. The clay has a little bit of a negative charge. That's a true thing. That's actually, yeah, oh yeah. And so maybe some positively charged molecules would stick to clay, and clay could be like our catalyst, I guess, for maybe getting these two together that might not normally get together. And instead of floating around in the ocean, they're stuck in a little dry tidal pool. You kind of get the idea. So we still need some energy to make that bond, so maybe some energy from the sun. We don't have oxygen yet, so we probably don't have too much of an ozone layer, so maybe they're getting blasted with some serious energy. And that serious energy might have been enough to get them to polymerize, which means to get two little molecules stuck together and make a big molecule. So that'd be cool. And so we tested it, we build a little tidal flat in the lab, and we make it clay on the bottom. We put all the pieces together for simple amino acids, and we put them all in there and hit it with some powerful light. We can get a couple to bond, and there you go. I mean, if you got a lab and some time, you can do some cool stuff. So here's a different hypothesis of how metabolism might have started. Uh, Again, we don't really know, but we've got some ideas. This one's called the iron sulfur world. It's proposed by this German name that I'm not going to try to pronounce. It has like little dots over the A's, and when you put that in your PowerPoint, it really freaks PowerPoint out and gives you these weird spacings. But there's washer, shower, whatever, I don't know how to say that name. So basically, the idea, we're going back to that whole deep sea hydrothermal bottom of the volcano ocean thing again. And they found these porous rocks near the vents, and the rocks had like little teeny tiny pockets in them. That's what porous means. And they were rich in iron sulfides. And iron sulfides can donate electrons, which is kind of cool. They can donate electrons to inorganic gases dissolved in seawater. And so once you start donating and receiving electrons, you start some very basic, very simple metabolism. Well, maybe. I don't know if we can even call it metabolism. Electron carriers are the basis for pretty much all of our metabolism. Photosynthesis, ATP production through cellular respiration, things like that. And so being able to donate, share electrons, give and take electrons is very, very important. So the idea is that maybe these gases could form molecules, and the molecules might have been stuck in the pores of those rocks. And the pores of the rocks were so small that they could have acted as like a cage or a frame where the first cells could have formed, and they become concentrated in a little pore of the rock, and maybe they start some acting as catalysts in really small concentrations in these rocks, and with enough time they get a few lipids around them, and you have a little cell in the bottom of the ocean. Like, that could totally be a thing. Maybe. It could sure work. Okay, cool. So that is, let's see, we need to go to 19.5, so we're good. All right, so that's iron sulfur world. All of our modern cells have DNA now, and you guys know that we pass DNAs to the exact copy of DNA to the next generation of cells. Cells use DNA as instructions to make proteins. That's all old information. And protein synthesis is dependent on DNA. Absolutely. DNA is built by proteins. Yep. And so the RNA world hypothesis is that RNA was probably our first molecule to store that genetic information. And like I already mentioned, RNA can function like an enzyme sometimes. And so we need something to enclose the molecules. Right now we're thinking tiny rock chambers might have been a boundary, but really sometime between then and now we need a plasma membrane. That's made of lipids, and so we're not really sure where that came from. There's ideas, but we don't really know. Protocell is, our membrane enclosed collection of interacting molecules, and these molecules have enough of, I guess they can replicate themselves and hopefully replicate the protocell, and that'd be about it. But we need a membrane and we need some stuff in there, so that's a protocell. Here's an illustration, a drawing, I guess, of a lab-produced protocell. It's got fatty acids on the outside and it's got RNA on the inside, so maybe that could be something. Here we have another one. Again, we put all the pieces together and we built it in a lab. It's a protocell consisting of RNA that was actually made on clay, and that's on the inside, and then the fatty acid alcohols are on the outside. So maybe that's something that could have worked. And then this hypothesis is about protocell formation. Here we have this guy's pouring his mixture of organic molecules, everything you need to make your cell, and phosphates into a hot pool in Russia to try to get a few, maybe we can get a few lipids around some other molecules if we pour it in a hot pool and get ourselves a little first cell built. So there's your ideas, of how we can make that work. So that takes us to 19.5, and that's where I wanted to stop for this video so we didn't go too long. So we'll pick up there next time. Thanks for your time.